Folks, welcome to this tremendous live stream. It's a tremendous show, truly incredible, the greatest show maybe ever. So many people are watching. We're doing record numbers. People are saying they've never seen anything like it. A tremendous show, really. On today's program, we have the Drunk Treasures. Is your president winning over the Mormons? I love the Mormons and their golden Bible, tremendous Bible, tremendous. The Big Ear Bulletin, these are great names for the elephant. The new apostle gets political. And first we have the elephant in the room, the showdown, the Latter-day Saints versus Donald Trump. Let's get into the very first segment. How about that? Elephant in the room. Okay. There we go. I botched it a little bit, but there's a little bit of the Trump impression. What'd you think? Jim Bennett, everyone. The well-known, and also well-known for his outspoken opinions about one Donald Trump on his X account. So, Jim, what's going on?
Not much. I'm impressed with your Trump impression. I can't really do one. So I admire those who have talents that I do not have.
I'm working on it. I think it's fun. I get a kick out of it. But so check this out. The question we are exploring as our friend, or maybe not friend, Donald Trump introduced is, how can Latter-day Saints support Trump? So I got to first ask, the first question I have for you, Jim, is what is it that you dislike about Trump? Let's get that out of the way.
Oh, how much time do you have? How long are we going to be going here tonight?
Well, let's try and aim for an hour if you're willing. Let's. I don't know. If you just had to pick a few things to summarize, because if you look on your Twitter account, I think it's fairly obvious that you really don't like what he's doing.
I don't like him more than I don't like what he's doing, which is the thing that gets lost when people accuse me of being Jim the Progmo, who's the raging liberal, because I don't know that we are in a circumstance anymore where we have the luxury of discussing policy and ideology. Because Donald Trump has normalized so many things that are so far out of bounds of what used to be acceptable political discourse that it's a bit like debating what you're going to have for dinner while your house is burning down. You know, and well, I really like hamburger. Well, I really like steak. Well, I really like chicken. I mean, that's, but the entire house is on fire and we're acting like it's normal and that it's acceptable.
But do you have any specifics here? Are you just kind of talking about rhetoric?
No, I'm not talking about rhetoric. I mean, I worked in the United States Capitol and gave tours of the United States Capitol and watched what felt to some degree like my home. I mean, my father served in the United States Capitol for 18 years, and I know those halls as well as anybody does. And when Trump instigated a riot to try to overthrow the results of a free and fair election, to me, it's like, why are we still even having a conversation that this man is in any way acceptable to be representing the United States of America in any capacity, let alone as Commander-in-Chief and President of the United States? This is, well, so I kind of think I have to give you a narrative rather than give you sort of a specifics, which is why I ask, how much time do you have? Because
well, we don't have to spend forever on the dislike, because I think it's pretty well known that you don't really like him, at least for anyone who follows you on X.
Okay. So for many years, for the better part of a decade, I made my living as a Republican hack, is the way I describe it. I was hired in 2004 by a man named Fred Lampropoulos, who was very conservative, ran for governor in 2004, came in third in the convention behind John Huntsman, and Nolan Karras was the other one that came out of that convention. And the sitting governor was Olene Walker, and we beat Olene Walker, and we were kind of proud of that. But I was essentially his communications director. He did all of these 2-minute radio ads, which are really rare because it's very expensive to book 2 minutes of time. But he would do a different ad every day that was essentially political commentary. And he said, Jim, I'm going to hire you. You can write half of them. I'll write half of them. And I wrote 97% of them. He wrote maybe one or two. I mean, he just didn't have time. I mean, it's not that he was lazy. It's just that. But so I ended up working on that campaign. My father was in the Senate at the time, which I think made me a hotter commodity than I would have been otherwise. And after that campaign, I was hired. Orrin Hatch hired me as his communications director. I was hired to run a campaign by the Utah Transit Authority to expand light rail and front runner. There were 2 ballot initiatives that I ran the campaign for. I ran the campaign for the Republican candidate for Salt Lake County mayor, a number of other different campaigns, some state legislature campaigns. I ran for the state legislature myself and lost the convention by 6 votes as a Republican. I've been an active conservative Republican for the vast majority of my life. I always want to say I've never been a Democrat, but that's not entirely true. When I was 18 years old, to make my parents angry, I registered as a Democrat.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that. 2 of my best friends, we all registered as Democrats thinking, haha, look how cool we are. And my parents didn't particularly care, and it didn't make any difference. And I went and served my mission, came back. 1992 was the first presidential election I voted in, voted for George H.W. Bush. 1996, voted for Bob Dole. My father was Bob Dole's campaign surrogate, flew on the campaign plane with him all throughout that. Absolutely loathed Bill Clinton, just absolutely loathed him, was utterly disgusted with what an immoral, dishonest man he was, and am really ashamed that, all of the people that told me that character mattered in 1992 are now telling me that when a president of the United States is found in a court of law to have sexually assaulted someone, that's not a big deal anymore. It's not. I mean,
locker room talk. That's what it was, Jim. Locker room talk.
Yeah, well,
that's what he said. When
by the pussy stuff.
Yeah, I know. Whoa,
but I'm talking about E. Jean Carroll, who actually brought suit against him, and he's an adjudicated rapist. And people go, well, no, he's not a rapist because the jury found that it was sexual assault, not rape. And I say, yeah, you know why? Because the legal definition of rape requires penetration by a penis, and she couldn't tell whether or not the assault involved his penis or his finger. And so I'm saying, excusing it on that basis, guys, is not a good look. It's just anyway. So my bona fides as a Republican were unquestioned for a decade, and then I ran my father's losing 2010 final campaign for the United States Senate, which he lost to Mike Lee. And I remember when I took that job, I said to myself, geez, if he loses, I'm going to feel guilty for the rest of my life. And I haven't had a day's worth of guilt.
That's good.
Absolutely. He lost because for 2 reasons. One was everybody was upset about TARP. And my guess is you don't even know what TARP is.
You mean the blue thing you lay out before you set up your tent? Is that what you're talking about?
In 2008, the entire worldwide financial system was on the verge of collapse. Have you ever seen the movie The Big Short?
I haven't.
Okay.
But you're talking about the housing crisis in 2008. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the 2008 housing crisis, you had all of these people selling these junk loans, and they were putting them in assets. I mean, it's all kind of complicated, but essentially you had all of these junk assets cluttering up the world financial market to the point where banks were refusing to lend to each other. And as my father and Mitt Romney both described it at the time, this was like running an engine without any oil, that it was all going to seize up, and the world financial market was on the verge of just total collapse and a genuine worldwide depression. And the only way that anybody could see a way to keep the markets moving was to inject a massive amount of capital into those markets. And so my father was actually one of the main architects of it. This is another reason he lost. They called it the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP. And they injected, and this seems like a quaint amount of money now, but they injected $80 billion into the world financial market just to keep the banking system afloat. And they did so on the basis of loans. These were loans. This was not a. They kept calling it the bailout, but it was a loan, and it was repaid with interest. The Troubled Asset Relief Program was a massive success. It had major bipartisan support, and it didn't cost the federal government a dime, and it ended up making them money. But the Tea Party conservatives, and are you too young to remember what the Tea Party was?
I remember the Tea Party, led by Glenn Beck in a lot of ways.
Led by Glenn Beck. I have a lovely Glenn Beck story to tell you if you're interested in it. Have you heard my Glenn Beck story?
I haven't, but let's save that because we're actually going to talk about him a little bit later.
Okay,
because he's going to come up a little bit later. So
all right, then I'll save the Glenn Beck story for later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Tea Party was furious about that because we were just too much spending, wild and dangerous spending, and it just cracks me up because Mike Lee, who was so angry about the spending, has no problem with the fact that his president, Donald Trump, spent more in 4 years in his first term than Barack Obama did in 8, and that we're on track to just dwarf the reckless, profligate spending of the first term in the second term. I mean,
it's a new Republican Party. It's a
new Republican Party that is completely divorced from any of the principles that animated the Republican Party that my father represented and that I worked in and that I believed in. I mean, it's a Republican Party whose principles are anathema to the Republican Party pre-2016. I remember a Republican Party that believed in fiscal responsibility. I remember a Republican Party that believed in free trade and free markets. If a Republican Party doesn't believe in free markets, what does it believe in? And now we have the most genuinely socialist president. Everybody screams about socialism. This is a guy who bought 10%, didn't buy, seized 10% of Intel for the federal government and said, we're gonna run Intel with them, and isn't this great? I mean, it's just so bizarre to me when people come lashing out at me and saying, Jim the liberal, Jim the progmo. And they're embracing principles that would have gotten, the Ronald Reagan would have drummed them out of the party for. Ronald Reagan himself would be drummed out of the party at this point.
Okay, wait, here's a question then, which,
sure.
Hold on, my screen's not sharing. But, okay. I think the sane people in the country understand that there's nuance to everything, and I hate that buzzword, but it's a buzzword nonetheless.
There is zero nuance.
Well, I'm just going to say, with Donald Trump, okay, surely everyone can recognize that everything a president does isn't bad, and even if you don't like him, and even if you like him, everything they do isn't good. So I just have to ask you, Jim. Is there anything? What do you like about Trump? What has he done that you do support, or what do you actually appreciate about Trump?
In his first term, Donald Trump settled the wilderness debate in Utah that has been going on forever. He didn't really understand what he was doing. Secretary of the Interior understood what he was doing. In his first term, Donald Trump had competent people around him, which drove him crazy. And so he ended up firing all of them. Or they ended up resigning after he tried to overthrow the government. his cabinet secretaries left en
Mike
masse
Pence. Yeah.
at the end of his term because he was an insurrectionist. I mean, but that's normal now. That's an acceptable part of political discourse. This is the worst thing that Trump has done. I mean, I can point to several policy things that Trump has done that I've liked. I have, for instance, I have no problem with any of Trump's Supreme Court picks. I think they're all very competent, and I got in trouble because I was really kind of disgusted with the way Brett Kavanaugh was treated in the Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, I can point to any number of different things that Donald Trump has done, or that the Trump administration has done and has gotten right almost by mistake in some ways. but that is not the issue. That really isn't the issue. The issue is, again, what we have normalized, what is now acceptable. So I remember at the very, well, again, I need to continue with my narrative a little bit.
Okay.
With my journey out of the Republican Party. Because I saw in my
Rhino Jim, that's what you are.
Rhino Jim.
Jimbo.
I decided not to even be a Rhino anymore. It became very clear after my father lost. I was approached by a man named Sam Granado, who since passed away. Lovely man, a restaurateur in Salt Lake City, who was the Democratic candidate in the 2010 race. And in talking to him, I said, "Look, you're actually more conservative than Mike Lee is." Mike Lee wanted to. Mike Lee wanted to amend the Constitution in 6 different ways, including getting rid of the 14th Amendment that made slaves citizens. Including he wanted to get rid of the 17th Amendment to require the direct election of senators. And my father, during that campaign, used to read a speech called "The Constitution and the Restoration" that was given at BYU by the president of BYU, a man named Rex Lee, Mike Lee's father. And if you read that speech, it reads like a direct repudiation of everything Mike Lee was campaigning on. It was very clear that the Tea Party, which ended up morphing into Trumpism, was actively rejecting so much of the conservatism that had animated my whole political career. I kind of want to even say career, but just my own personal political ideology and principles were rooted in the kind of Reaganism that is completely unwelcome in the party of Trump. So I said to Sam Granado, "Look, I'd much rather you were the senator." And he said, "Well, then why don't you come work for me?" And I said, "Well, I think that might embarrass my father." And he said, "Well, we won't have to tell anybody." And 3 days after I said, "Yes, I'll work for you," I got a phone call from Paul Raleigh at the Salt Lake Tribune, who said, "Yeah, we know you're working for the Granado campaign, and we're running a story. Do you want it to run with or without a quote from you?" So I ended up, I'm kind of embarrassed by this, because this is a terrible thing for a candidate for the underling, the employee to upstage the candidate. But I ended up getting more press than Sam Granado did. Deseret News ran a front page story about me saying Bennett backs blue. And it was just this huge scandal that I was working for a Democrat. And I actually ended up, I was still a believing Republican at the time. And I created a group called Republicans for Granado, and it didn't make any difference. A Democrat hasn't won a statewide race in the state of Utah for close to 40 years now. But so that essentially ended my career as a political operative, so to speak. No Republican wanted to hire me after that, and I didn't want to work for any Democrats because I'm not a Democrat. I'm still not a Democrat. I did end up, I was approached by a former Democrat named Richard Davis, who was a political science professor at BYU. And he said, "You're a very prominent former Republican. I'm a very prominent former Democrat." He was the former state party. I think he was the state party chair at some point. And I know he was the Utah County party chair. That's what it was. Anyway, and he said, "We want to form a new party." But this is after Trump, so I need to talk a little bit about Trump. So this is a story that I've told on MSNBC to Andrea Mitchell and to Lawrence O'Donnell. This is a story I've told to the Wall Street Journal. This is a story that got national attention when it happened.
You heard it here, folks. The story got national attention. No.
Yeah.
You're not hearing the story here first. You're hearing that the story got national attention. But
the story got national attention. But so my father passed away almost 10 years ago now. It'll be 10 years in May. He died on May 4th of 2016. I remember that because it was Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. And that night, the bishop of his ward came and sat with us and cried with us, a man named Aaron Sherinian.
Yeah, I was going to say,
which
Aaron?
Is where my loyalty and love for Aaron Sherinian comes from, is that I saw him as a true pastor and disciple of Christ before he became a controversial political figure. Anyway, my father was suffering from pancreatic cancer, and he was planning on retiring in Salt Lake, but he stayed in Washington, D.C., in his home in Arlington, Virginia, in order to get treatment from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, which was apparently the best place to be. But in the end, it didn't matter because he suffered a debilitating stroke. And it was ultimately the stroke that took his life. And he had the stroke on April 11th and passed away on May 4th. And all of us sort of descended on Washington. All the kids did. We all, without our spouses. So it was like we were growing up again. There were all 6 kids back in the house. And we went to the hospital. I got there before my siblings did. And I went to the hospital, and he was still in the hospital just getting treatment for the stroke. And he turned to me. I was standing there with my mother, and he turned to both of us. And he asked, "Are there any Muslims in this hospital?" And I thought that was the strangest question I'd ever heard in my life. I thought that was the stroke talking. Ultimately, it wasn't. My father stayed entirely cogent up until the day he died, which was a tremendous blessing. It was one of the blessings, actually, that then Elder Christofferson promised him when he came to the hospital, and I stood in a circle with Elder Christofferson, and as Elder Christofferson essentially released my father from this life and promised him that he would be alert and cogent up until the end, which he was.
That's cool.
So he turned to me and he says, "Are there any Muslims in this hospital?" And I said, we were in, this is at George Washington University Hospital, right in the heart of Washington, D.C. I said, "I'm sure there are, Dad." And he said, "I want to go up to every single one of them and apologize on behalf of the Republican Party for Donald Trump." He was absolutely disgusted with Donald Trump, just up, down, and sideways. Disgusted. This was when Trump was trying to establish a Muslim ban, not allowing any Muslims to come into the country. And Dad saw that as so antithetical to the Latter-day Saint tradition, where we were refugees back in the day who were driven out of homes because of what we believed. And that's why we came to settle the Salt Lake Valley. And he had tremendous affinity for religious minorities. And when he saw the active persecution of Muslims that Trump was encouraging, he just found that loathsome on a moral level. And he went to his grave just lamenting what Trump was doing to the party. And when I started becoming outspoken against Trump, I remember one guy who served in a bishopric with my father. So he's of my father's generation. And he said, "Jim, you're not voting for Donald Trump? Don't you know how ashamed your father would be of you?"
Little did he know.
You know what? Dad and I are good. and he says, "What? Are you going to vote for Hillary?" And I said, "No."
Did you vote for McMuffin?
I didn't vote for Hillary. I voted third party. I was actually working.
McMullen?
No, I didn't vote for McMullen.
What other third party was running in that year?
I was hired by the Gary Johnson campaign. Gary Johnson.
Oh,
was the
Gary
Libertarian.
Anderson, the Libertarian.
And
Or
he,
Johnson.
I was his speechwriter and as ghostwriter. I wrote a lot of editorials.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was a great experience. And he was paying me, and so I felt like maybe I should vote for him. But I had convinced myself.
So he paid for your vote.
There you go. There you go. But I convinced myself that Hillary and Trump were equally loathsome. Because my hatred and I was kind of aghast when my father, before he passed away, said, "I'm voting for Hillary. I have to vote for Hillary. We cannot survive a Trump presidency." I mean, he was just absolutely adamant, and I just thought, "Dad, you're nuts. We can't." And when Trump won in 2016, my first thought was, "Oh, wonderful. We never have to hear from the Clintons again." Because nobody thought Trump was going to win, I think least of all Trump. I mean, it was such a surprise. It was such an upset.
But then he comes out and he's like, "We knew we were winning. We were winning big the entire time.
Yeah.
This is what we predicted." It was... Yeah, anyway.
So Trump wins, and he flirted with the idea of making Mitt Romney Secretary of State. That lasted for about 15 minutes. But he was putting people in his cabinet who were entirely competent and who were traditional Republicans.
So you liked first-term Trump?
Well, I didn't like first-term Trump.
But at least as far as policy goes? I mean, you talked about the judges.
I had hope for first-term Trump. I looked at that and went, okay, this won't be this is certainly better than if Hillary had won. And then what happened, though, is that Trump...
The 2020, the January 6th, is that what you're going to talk about?
No, I'm not going to talk about January 6th yet. I'm talking about his first term. One of the first things he said in one of his interviews, he talked about how terrible Muslims were because on 9/11, he remembers watching on television, the Muslims who were cheering on top of buildings all across New Jersey.
Yeah.
And this
I remember him saying that.
Documentably false. There were no Muslims cheering all over television.
Oh, wait, maybe I don't remember him saying that. I remember him saying something about the families of the people who committed the atrocity or something were cheering. I thought he was talking about back home. I don't remember, though. But
No, he talked about, this was in New Jersey. He's like, we have these terrible people who've infested our country, and they were cheering on tops of buildings. He says, I watched it on the news, and this was provably false. I mean, you can go back and look at the footage, and people did. People went and searched for the footage. Was there any possible way to reconcile that statement with reality? And the answer is no. It did not happen. And when Donald Trump...
Fake news, that's what it is.
He's confronted with the evidence that it does not happen, doubles down on the lie. And that's when I started going, okay, this is a problem. This is a problem because we have a president who refuses to acknowledge objective reality. It's one thing to have a wild and dangerous opinion, but do you remember Kellyanne Conway very early in the administration talking about alternative facts? Do you remember that?
Oh, no, I don't remember that.
So Sean Spicer is Donald Trump's press secretary, first press secretary. And the first thing that he does when he comes out is say, more people attended the Trump inauguration than attended Obama's inauguration or any inauguration in history, period. And that's not true. I mean, it's not that we're trying to be mean to Donald Trump or we don't like him or that
people don't like him.
It's demonstrably not true. It did not happen. We have photographs, we have records. We know that was not true. And just on and on and on, it became painfully clear that Donald Trump will say anything and will refuse to ever back down if it's proven false. He'll never say, oops, I made a mistake. Oops, I misstated it. he just makes up crap over and over and over and over again. And it became terrifying, and it became terrifying as you watched good people in his administration start dropping like flies. John Kelly, defense secretary, has now gone on record to say that Donald Trump was talking about the suckers and losers who sign up for the military. That's all that there are, suckers and losers. And you know, I don't understand.
Let me interrupt you real quick, because
Sure.
before we get, let's take a quick pause, because we have some super chats coming in. People are being nice, so that's good. Someone did say, oh gosh,
I don't care if they're not nice. I expect them not to be. So
no,
I'm bracing myself.
People are nice. Well, and this one, they respect you, but they said, this is why you have lost, Jim. You're a boomer who still thinks it's the 80s. So just a one-sentence reaction to that, boomer Jim.
I'm Generation X. I'm not
Are you
boomer.
even a boomer? I was going to say, yeah. Okay.
I was
response.
born in 1968. Boomers ended in 1964. I'm very solidly Gen X. Second,
He's pulling Obama on Romney to you. He's saying, hey, the 80s called. They want their policies back. SCAX229, SNEAX229 says, Jim, what did you think about the clavicular getting frame mogged by the ASU frat leader?
I have no idea what that is.
I don't know what that is either. So maybe add some clarification, but thank you both for the super chats. Real quick, just like a few more questions before we move on to another segment talking about, we're going to continue talking about Trump in the next segment. But first, getting back to members of the church and Latter-day Saints in that relationship. You know, you see him shaking hands here, which I think is funny. Very complimentary of the first presidency when he had them give him a tour of the Bishop's Storehouse. But two questions. Was it a miracle that Donald Trump survived the assassination?
No.
Okay. Second question. Has Trump's presidency helped or hindered the growth of the church? What do you think?
I think it has massively hindered the growth of the church in ways that we have yet to see in full fruition. Long term, I think it's done extensive damage to the reputation of the church.
Do you think that's mostly from like foreign policy issues and things like that? Or where do you think the biggest damage is being done? Or domestically?
I wrote I used to write for the Deseret News. I wrote editorials for the Deseret News, and I wrote a column for the Deseret News. I was a columnist up until when I ran for Congress with the United Utah Party, and that I couldn't continue to work while I was a political candidate. Work as a objective journalist.
Writer, journalist.
I wasn't objective. I was a columnist. I wrote opinions.
Oh, sorry, columnist, opinions.
But the church came massively under fire for the Tabernacle Choir singing at Trump's first inauguration. Most artists, most singers refused. Were too disgusted. But the choir said yes. And I wrote a lengthy column saying that was entirely appropriate for the choir to go, because if they had not
attend, it sounded like you were going to say that they shouldn't go, but it was good that they went.
I mean, people are assuming that I was going to say that. I did say, we can get to that later. I wrote this column saying, look, the choir has always gone to an inauguration every time they've been asked, regardless of who has asked, regardless of the party of who has asked. Now, the only Democrat that asked the choir to sing was Lyndon Johnson, but he asked them and they showed up. And if the choir had not gone to sing, I had a conversation, so I guess I am going to say what I was going to tell you. Because after I was not a member of the choir at the time. I joined the choir in 2019. And I'm wearing my cool Tab Choir gang jacket.
Super cool. Yeah. So, do you get a bike with that too, so you can bike around Salt Lake City?
Yeah. Big old handlebars. But after he won in 2020, I started posting things like, I am dreading
Wait, Trump won in 2020? Is that
absurd? That was a Freudian slip, wasn't it?
We won in
After he won in
2016, 2020.
He did not win in
2024.
2020.
And 2028. How's that sound? 2020?
So after Trump won in 2024,
go ahead.
I said, I'm dreading another invitation.
But he didn't.
He didn't. And,
I was surprised by that.
When I started posting that, there were actually members of the choir who were not happy that I was doing that. And I got a message from Mike Levitt, who is the president of the choir. He's also the former governor of Utah.
Yeah.
Who was elected the same year my father was elected to the Senate. He's also the former Secretary of Health and Human Services in the Bush administration. He spoke at my father's funeral. He's a lovely man and a family friend, and also the president of the Tabernacle Choir. And I got a message from him that said, I've seen your social media posts. Would you like to talk about it? And my blood froze. I thought, I'm in trouble. I'm going to get called on the carpet. And that was actually not the case. I had a lovely conversation with Mike Levitt about all of this. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the conversation, but the one thing I said is, look, I have such a huge problem. Donald Trump has, to some degree, become a trial of my faith. Not just it's not just that I politically don't like him. It's that we are, the 13th article of faith, whatever is virtuous, lovely, of good report, or praiseworthy, we seek after these things. And there has never been a man infesting the Oval Office that does not match that description. As violently as Donald Trump does not match that description. There is nothing virtuous, lovely, of good report, or praiseworthy about Donald Trump. And I said, I don't understand how 2/3 of my fellow Latter-day Saints who have the gift of discernment and the gift of the Holy Ghost and are promised that by the power of the Holy Ghost they may know the truth of all things, decided that this was acceptable. And especially in 2024, because I can understand people voting for Donald Trump in 2016. I don't understand how anybody could continue to support him when it became clear just what human garbage he is. But in 2020, after he tries to overthrow the government, and after Dallin H. Oaks says we need to accept Latter-day Saints should accept the results of elections. Said that in advance before January 6th, and everybody seems to have forgotten that. But to watch that happen and then say, yeah, I'm going to vote for that. That's who I want to be president of the United States. I can't fathom it. And to me, it has nothing to do with politics. I mean, people look at this and think that this is Republican versus Democrat. This is decent versus indecent. This is, so another little bit of inside baseball for you. When I wrote for the Deseret News, I was one of their editorial writers. I would write what they call house editorials. Do you know what a house editorial is?
I'm guessing it has to do with the Chamber of Congress, known as the House.
It doesn't have to do with Chamber of Congress.
No, I don't know.
Back when newspapers were a thing, which they really aren't anymore. The Deseret News doesn't exist as a newspaper that shows up on your doorstep every day, the way it did for 100 years. They publish a print edition once a week. But back when they published a print edition every day, they had a section called Opinion, the opinion section. And you would open the page in the opinion section, and there was the House editorial, which it would say, in our opinion. And it was unsigned. There was no author attributed to these editorials. It represented the opinion of the House. It represented the opinion of the
newspaper. Gotcha.
Of the newspaper, of the Deseret News. And I still sort of joke The goal of a Deseret News editorial is to offend the least amount of people possible. Because everybody, and maybe even rightfully so, looks at what the Deseret News says, and particularly their opinion section, particularly when we say, okay, this is the opinion of the entire newspaper. They say, well, this is obviously the opinion of the church too. And they don't want you to think that. They don't want you to say that, but they are very mindful that that's how it's interpreted. So what that means is that you cannot lead out on anything. You have to be timid. You have to write something that isn't going to offend anybody and isn't going to make anybody think that the church is taking some kind of extreme position. I remember writing an editorial, for instance. I was assigned to write an editorial opposed to human trafficking. Now, if you want to just bang your head against the wall, try coming up with 450 words as to why human trafficking is bad. Because it's like, well, is there anybody that doesn't
like,
think
who are you trying to convince? Yeah.
Is there a pro-human trafficking contingent out there that it's excruciating to try to write something that really is ultimately kind of insignificant. You're not really saying anything. You're just sort of writing pablum that is acceptable. There were exceptions to this. And the exceptions were times where the church had let out. For instance, editorials opposed to same-sex marriage had no problem getting published. Editorials taking a very sort of liberal stand on immigration had no problem getting published. People don't realize that the church's position, an official position on immigration, is really diametrically opposed to the Trump administration's position. And I had a lengthy talk with Bill Evans, the director of the church's director of governmental relations. I was interviewing for his job, and I was up at the final interview. And then he finally said, "I'm not retiring for another 3 years," so I didn't get the job. But he talked about, look, when the church would take these positions, and the government relations people would take a position like this, everybody would just sort of reject it and say, oh, well, the church didn't say that. It's just the government relations guys that said that. He's like, really? Do you really think the church would allow us to go rogue like that? Do you think I'd still have a job if I were saying the church supports this immigration position and the church didn't really support this immigration position? So anyway, all that is background to after I left the Deseret News. Donald Trump. So I did. This isn't after I left. I ran for Congress in 2017. 2016, I left to go write for Gary Johnson, but I came back after Gary Johnson lost, and then I left permanently after I ran for Congress. But during that time when I was not there, Deseret News ran an opinion piece calling on Donald Trump to drop out of the race. Do you remember that?
I do not. Was this before or after Romney gave his speech at the University of Utah?
It's about the same time, but it was right after the Access Hollywood tape came out.
Oh, yeah. Locker room talk.
They just said this is evil. They used the word evil. This is a man who is a disgrace, a man who has no business being anywhere near the highest office of the land. And I thought, okay, I know how these editorial decisions are made. There is no possible way that they could have written that editorial without running it up the flagpole, without the first presidency saying, yes, go ahead and write that.
The first presidency? You think it goes all the way up to the first presidency?
I can't imagine. And the publisher of the Deseret News at the time, by the way, a man by the name of Clark Gilbert. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I have.
But the idea that the Deseret News could go rogue like that, because the Deseret News does not endorse candidates. Salt Lake Tribune does. They'll say, in our opinion, please vote for the Democrat. But the Deseret News will never endorse a candidate because they're afraid that people will say, oh, it's the church endorsing a candidate. It's the church endorsing a party. And for the Deseret News to say Donald Trump is evil and needs to drop out of the race, I cannot imagine Clark Gilbert making that decision without running it up the flagpole. They insisted that it was their own decision, and okay, great. But from my perspective, opposition to Donald Trump is a moral issue. It is not a political issue. It is not acceptable in my mind to stage an insurrection and not be held accountable for it. It's not acceptable in my mind to be a rapist and still be the president of the United States. It's one of the reasons why I couldn't stand Bill Clinton. I was like, really? There are credible accusations of rape against Bill Clinton, and we ignore them. We don't care. The Epstein files demonstrate that this man is as scummy as they come. And the idea that now, but that's acceptable. We don't, it is so bizarre to me as someone who lived through the Lewinsky impeachment and Republicans screaming about how essential character is to the presidency of the United States. It is just, it is beyond bizarre to me how we've abandoned all of those principles.
So here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Is it possible for a Latter-day Saint who is not ignorant about Donald Trump to vote for him and or support him and still be a good Latter-day Saint?
Well, this is the challenge that I've got, because I sustained Dallin H. Oaks as a prophet, seer, and revelator. And one of the things that Dallin H. Oaks said that is thrown back in my face a number of times, because I've thrown it in the face of many Republican Latter-day Saints, is we should never say a good Latter-day Saint can't vote for a particular candidate or a particular party. The church has also said that straight party voting is a threat to democracy, which is a really rather pointed statement. And again, these are statements that so many members of the church ignore, and they all say, well, Jim the Progmo, how dare you? You
straight
have to be...
Party voting, meaning like voting just down ballot Republican?
Yeah. And President Oaks gave a very thoughtful speech about how sometimes he said, there is no party that represents all all the principles that you like, and sometimes you have to pick and choose, and you can go back
always
and forth.
Pick and choose.
Yeah, but
I mean, go ahead.
That no one party has the mandate from heaven, and so many Republicans in the church think they don't mean that. Telling me that I'm stuck in the 80s, they're stuck in the 50s. They're stuck in the time when Ezra Taft Benson was an apostle who was vehemently opposed by other apostles who were disgusted with how partisan he made his apostleship. But he insisted, I think it's a direct quote, that you cannot be a good Latter-day Saint and a Democrat at the same time. And so many people hark back to that and ignore everything that's happened in between. But Dallin H. Oaks made it very clear that that's not acceptable. So I would throw that in the face of everybody who came after me and said, how dare you support Joe Biden? Joe Biden was the first Democrat I've ever voted for. Kamala Harris was the second for president. I'm trying to think if I'd voted down ballot for Democrats before that, and I don't think I had, but I have since. Okay. But so when you ask me, can you be a good Latter-day Saint and vote for Donald Trump? My answer to you is I follow and I sustain the prophet, and it's not appropriate for me to say that you can't be a good Latter-day Saint and not vote for Donald Trump. Now, that said, I don't think, I'm going to go further though.
Okay.
I don't think you can be a decent person and vote for Donald Trump. I just don't see how you can do it.
But doesn't that contradict being a good Latter-day Saint?
Yes. And this is the tension that I'm living with on a daily basis.
I mean, I don't know how you reconcile that.
Well, I don't. I sort of sit in the tension of that. And, people say, well, Jim, you just hate all of your fellow church members. And that is not true. And in fact,
you think they're not decent, though? Is that the words you want to use here, or do you want to?
Yeah, they are. They are because I mean, I don't know what other word to use. I don't know what other way to describe that. Because to say that it's acceptable to have a man like Donald Trump in that office, and that it's just a difference of political opinion, is to make rape partisan. It's to make insurrection partisan. And those shouldn't be partisan. We shouldn't, I mean, they're disqualifying. They are absolutely disqualifying. And there are so many other things that Donald Trump has done that are absolutely disqualifying that have nothing to do with political ideology. They have to do with basic decency. And if you're willing to overlook that kind of stuff because you like the ideology, then I don't know how I can say, well, yeah, that's very decent of you. That's okay that you don't have a problem with him being a rapist. Well, then all right. I mean, I don't know how to square that circle. Now, I'm not going to leave the church. I mean, I'm not. And I live with that kind of contradiction and difficulty every day. And I'm sure there are plenty of people, and they're maybe screaming at you in the chat at the moment, but there are plenty of people that will say, well, Jim Bennett isn't a decent person, and they can come they want to say about how terrible I am. I mean, that's kind of I've made my bed there and I'm lying in it. But the reality is, I mean, that's kind of where I've landed. I have to, I firmly believe, and this isn't necessarily about Trump, but this is kind of how I have reconciled a lot of challenges that I see in the church. I rattle on about how important it is that we embrace the reality of fallibility. That it's not just a sort of glitch in the system that prophets are fallible and that leaders are fallible. It is the basic fundamental purpose of mortality. We each chose to be fallible. We were each Adam and Eve, and we each chose to separate ourselves from God to come to a fallen world where we would make mistakes and learn from them and learn the good from the evil. I mean, that to me is the basic principle of mortality. So I'm not going to leave the church because I have problems with the fallibility of my fellow church members, and that I cannot understand or appreciate their vote there. But the Lord, I think the big challenge of discipleship is sustaining people, not people you agree with, but people you disagree with. I think it's a much greater act of faith to sustain someone with whom you disagree than it is to sustain someone with whom you agree. And I think that's what we're each called to do. We're each called to live with people sometimes who drive us nuts. But so I don't think anybody should be kicked out of the church for voting for Donald Trump. I don't think anybody should be punished for voting for Donald Trump. But I personally, on a personal level, can't understand how you can reconcile that with basic human decency. I don't understand how you do that, and it's not my job to judge you or condemn you for that. It's a Jim Bennett problem. It's not a you problem. It's a me problem. George Costanza. It's not you. It's me. I invented. It's not you. It's me. But I mean, I fully recognize that this is a trial of my faith. It isn't somebody else's trial, and it isn't my role to serve as a jury or executioner. I'm not calling on anybody to be disciplined or driven out or anything really. But I personally look at this situation and think it is so glaringly obvious that we have not just the worst president of the United States, but the worst human being in the United States serving as president of the United States.
You don't think there's someone worse than Trump?
I don't.
Here's a question. TDS, you get accused of this all the time.
Yeah.
Do you have Trump derangement syndrome?
I don't care if I do. I mean, Trump derangement syndrome isn't a thing. I mean, you're acting like you're asking me like do you have gonorrhea? You know, gonorrhea is an actual disease, right? It's diagnosable.
I'm just curious to see how you react.
Well, I mean, when somebody accuses me of TDS, I can instantly say you're not really capable of making a substantive argument here. You're calling me names. It's like calling me a poopy head. I mean, there isn't any substance to it, and it's also people don't recognize the origins of that because the first time anybody talked about derangement syndrome, it was Bush derangement syndrome. That there were so many people
did not like Bush
who loathed George W. Bush, and it was they coined the idea of Bush derangement syndrome. And I was a big fan of George W. Bush, but I even then thought that was kind of silly. In that it's not an argument. It's like when people call the church a cult. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? It means you don't like the church. It doesn't say anything objective about the church. It tells me your attitude toward the church. It doesn't tell me anything substantive about the church. You're just calling names, really. And TDS, it's just a name. I mean, I don't have a diagnosable medical condition. And so when you tell me I have TDS, it's just like, okay, so you're not a serious person. You're not really making an argument. You're just calling me names. And in the era of Trump, that's kind of what we're reduced to. And one of the things that frustrates me more than anything is that when I was sort of coming into my own in terms of building and understanding my own personal political ideology, I was really frustrated. I mean, I was a huge Rush Limbaugh fan, for instance.
Okay.
And the reason I was a huge Rush Limbaugh fan is that the media was so profoundly left-leaning that everybody just kind of went, okay, well, that is reality. I mean, well, of course, of course abortion needs to be legal because that's just 100% the way it has to be. I mean, that, of course, I mean, it's so hard for you youngins and me boomers. I'm not a boomer, I'm on Generation X. But it's so hard for you guys to recognize a media landscape pre-internet that when there were only 3 networks and everybody got their news from the same source, and all of that news leaned left. All of that news was very profoundly left. And Rush Limbaugh came along, and all of a sudden you had somebody talking about conservative things. And it was like, oh, great, we have a voice. And it was wonderful. And but then what it's become is instead of now the idea that now you have this left-leaning biased media, we now, with the democratization of information and the internet, we are now capable of siloing ourselves in genuine alternate realities. It's not just we see things differently, that some of us see things conservatively and some of us see things liberally. It's that we genuinely have a reality. Donald Trump lives in a reality, and so do many of his followers, in which he won the 2020 presidential election. I mean, it's they also live in a reality where the COVID vaccine killed more people than COVID did. And I mean, just things that
Which is funny because Trump's administration was the one who actually was in the presidency when the vaccine came out.
There's kind of a lovely irony in the fact that really was his greatest accomplishment, and he can't take credit for it because so many of his followers hate it.
I'm old enough to remember Mike Pence and Kamala Harris debating, and Mike Pence saying, "Hey, you're undermining the vaccine that we created."
Yeah.
And then it totally flipped.
Yeah. Well, and you see the church members, so many of them. I mean, the church let out on this and was way out in front and said, "Get the vaccine and wear a mask." And I mean, that was as soon as the church was asserting objective reality. Those people that live in the Trump reality rejected it, even if they're church members. And they're much more willing to believe Donald Trump than they were willing to believe Russell Nelson. And that, to me, is really, really problematic. And I don't think we've recovered from that. And I think in many ways we've gotten worse. And you know, so I've reached a point where, I mean, people are like, Jim just blocks everybody on Twitter. Jim won't engage. It's like, yeah, you know what? I am more than happy to engage with anybody with a different opinion. I think it's fascinating and it's wonderful. I can respect an informed argument, and I really kind of enjoy it. It sharpens my. That kind of engagement is something that I really think is fun. When you find somebody who's really smart, who really disagrees with you, I mean, hold on to that person. I mean, that's how you learn. That's how you do this. With Trump, I do not share a common set of facts with so many Trump supporters. I mean, you can't have a constructive conversation with somebody that denies basic principles of objective reality. I mean, it is a complete waste of time to try to convince somebody who thinks the sky is green that the sky is in fact blue, unless you share this sort of commonality of reality, of base facts. You can't have a constructive conversation. And so when people jump in and start screaming at me and tell me that Trump won the 2020 election and the COVID vaccine killed more people than COVID did, and I mean, you can go just down the list of things that Trump has convinced people of. I mean, Trump's out there just screaming, this is the best economy in the history of the country. It's
the greatest economy, the likes of which you've never seen.
I mean, it's
go ahead, Jim. Let's hear it.
It's not the worst economy in the history of the country by any means.
Wrong.
But it's just when somebody came out with a bad jobs report, Donald Trump fired the person who gave us the jobs report. Rather than acknowledge the reality, Donald Trump just lives in the reality he wants to live in. And I don't see how we survive that, if that endures. And at one point, I used to think, I mean, after Trump lost in 2020, and everybody thinks, and this is the other thing that people don't realize, is that Joe Biden, I had no great love for Joe Biden. I was not, yeehaw, Joe Biden is going to be a great president. It was, yeehaw, Joe Biden is going to be a normal president and probably a bad one. We can survive, and we have survived, legions of bad presidents. We can't survive a president who denies objective reality and who, refuses any kind of accountability for anything that he does on any basis. And, you know, we can't survive as a country if roughly half of us refuse to acknowledge objective reality. If Trump says this is the greatest economy in history, and we've made $17 trillion from tariffs, and I've cut drug prices by 1,600%. I mean, none of those things are true. I mean, whether you like them or not, whether you like tariffs, whether you like what Trump's doing on the economy, I mean, this has nothing to do with your opinion. It has to do with the fact that this guy's telling you the sky is green and demanding that you respect his opinion. When it's not an opinion, it's an error. He is wrong. He is, I mean, it's there aren't two sides to these kinds of things. And so this is the thing that is so maddening and has made any kind of constructive engagement with Trump supporters all but impossible as far as I'm concerned. And, and so how do I stay in the church surrounded by people who voted for Trump? As soon as politics comes up, I just have to say, I can't talk to you about this. I just can't.
Xander Sturgill sends in a super chat that says, Jim, you're awesome. Thanks for standing up.
I love Xander. Xander is a wonderful human being.
You know Xander?
I do know Xander.
All right. We need to get into our next segment. This is the Trunk Treasures. So let's get into that. Elephant in the... For the Trunk Treasures, we look at the hidden gems across the internet. But first, the purpose of this channel is to elevate members of the church by building bridges of understanding through fun and informative content. That's what we're trying to do here with Jim Bennett, outspoken anti-Trumper. Second, to help honest actors to take the church seriously by exposing limitations of critics and correcting misconceptions. So thank you to the Pachyderm members. We have Jacob Wardle, 6432, and Professor Chimp 1. Thank you very much for contributing. And to the Mammoth members, we have Curious Madcat, a awesome Catholic guy. Very cool. Kiori, author, YouTuber, and cool guy. We got Smuggy Thornton. We got Thorgus 951. Latter-day Scooby, who works with Sam from Through the Mist, and Brooke Sabin. So if you want to help us correct the record about the Latter-day Saints online and then consider joining the herd by clicking subscribe. Go ahead, people. Let's do it. Let's hit that subscribe button. Come on now. Let's do it. All right. They won't do it. Like a dog. That's what they are. Little dogs. Go ahead. Hit the button. All right. That's great. All right. So that's what we're trying to do. So, Jim, you're being a little doomsday with some of your speech here. So let's lighten up a little bit if we can. This is good stuff.
All right.
But you didn't watch this. So I made this video about Trump, and I titled it How Trump Won Over the Latter-day Saints. I kind of did a review of the history because in 2016, it was so much in the narrative of the news that the Latter-day Saints were not going to vote for this guy for a lot of the reasons you already described earlier. That CNN was predicting that Utah would vote third party. They had Utah as a yellow Utah square and said that McMullen or maybe even Hillary could win the election in Utah for the general election for the presidency. But then so then you have the primaries, and Trump doesn't even come in first. He doesn't come in second. I believe he comes in third. Ted Cruz absolutely destroys in Utah. I think Kasich came in second, and then it was Trump. I might be wrong about who came in second. Point is he hardly got any votes. I think the first ever election that Trump was on the ballot for in Utah in the Republican primary, he got like less than 10,000 votes or something. Fast forward to the general election, and he wins. He doesn't win by as much as Republicans have won in the past, but he wins. McMullen takes like 20%, Hillary another 20%, and I think he squeezes out, a decent 40%, lower 40%. But then fast forward to 2020, he increases his margin, over 50%. Of Utahns vote for Trump. Then in 2024, he increased the margin again slightly by I think it was like 58% or so voted for him in 2024. Meanwhile, you had Mitt Romney outspoken against him in 2016. You even had Glenn Beck outspoken against him in 2016. And now Glenn Beck is a supporter of Trump. Romney continues to be against Trump. And so in this video, I tried to explore what is it that made people what did Trump do to win over the Latter-day Saints? Because at the end, they didn't like him at first. Then they ended up voting for him. And I kind of get into the nuance of why Utah might not represent the Latter-day Saints and kind of looking at Latter-day Saints at large and not just Utah. But Utah's a decent proxy for some of this stuff. So it gets a little bit more complicated than that. But basically, I tried to lay it out, and this is all before the 2024 election, so I didn't know who was going to win. And based on, because I grew up in Utah, I know a lot of people in Utah, and how people would describe it is, yeah, we don't like how he talks, we don't like how he is as a person, but he put in some great Supreme Court judges. Hey, he moved the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He did pretty good on foreign policy stuff. So, and the Utahns that I talked to said, we're going to, in the long term, these conservative judges that he put on were worth it. And so we're going to vote for him again. I think, and that's my thesis, essentially, of why I think Utah voted for him at even higher numbers after the 2016 election. So there's a few people who responded, and this is some of the stuff they said. So this is where I want to get into your little Glenn Beck story. D.H. Witt 79 said, "This is why I have the utmost respect for Glenn Beck." So I talked about him in the video, how he was anti-Trump. And literally, I remember listening to his radio program where he said, you will want to, with Trump, it will be so bad that you will be willing to give up one of your arms to get back to Obama, which I thought was crazy for Glenn Beck to say, because he has a history of very much not liking Obama. And then, anyway, you fast forward and you have the Glenn Beck who is actively campaigning for Trump in 2024. I put a clip of him in 2024 before the election saying, we got to go out, we got to vote for Trump. So, Jim, why do you think Glenn Beck changed his story? And tell us your story about Glenn Beck that you have for us, if you would, please.
I read something like that, and it just kind of makes my the hair on the back of my neck stand up on end. Glenn Beck is demonstrably dishonest to a level of worse in many ways than Donald Trump, because Glenn Beck is not nearly as stupid as Donald Trump is. I used to say, in 2016, when I refused to vote for Hillary or Trump, I would say Trump commits second degree dishonesty, whereas Hillary commits first degree dishonesty. In other words, it's the difference between second degree murder and first degree murder is premeditation. Someone is still convicted of murder if they get all heated up and kill somebody in the heat of the moment, but that's considered second degree murder if it isn't pre-planned. Donald Trump, I don't know, even has the cognitive capacity at this point to separate truth.
Didn't you just say last segment that Trump was the worst person in the United States to be president? Yeah. But he's also ignorant, so he's not as guilty. Is that what you're saying here?
No,
because he doesn't have a brain, so he's bad. But help me understand.
No, it isn't just because he's stupid. I mean, he's also venal and vicious, and he's a mob boss. He's nice country you have here, Ukraine. It'd be terrible if something were to happen to it.
He's a bully with even our allies.
But he is so far gone with regard to living in whatever weird world he lives in that I genuinely don't know if he can separate reality from fantasy at this point. I mean, he just said, just this weekend, for instance, he was talking about what a great time he had in this foursome with Ron DeSantis and all this kind of stuff. And they said, well, how did it go? And then as the conversation went on, he said, well, I didn't even get a chance to play. Like 10 seconds ago, you were talking about being on the links with Ron DeSantis, and now you didn't even get a chance to play. I mean, and to him, it was just, I look, for instance, after the Greenland fiasco, this isn't Glenn Beck, but I have a doozy of a story about Glenn Beck. But after the Greenland
let's see if we can tie it in. Yeah.
After the Greenland fiasco, he told the story of, he's like, we need to have the lowest drug prices in the world in the United States. So how do you get the lowest drug prices in the world in the United States? Well, if you're Donald Trump, you get all other countries to raise their drug prices. And how does that help the United States exactly? I don't know. So he talked. He
Well, when you
tells
pull
this
up the chart,
lengthy
we're
story.
now, you know, when you pull up the chart of average drug prices, we're no longer at the highest. We're in the middle because everyone's went up.
But so what? If
I know. I'm
drugs
just
cost
trying
you
to.
$50 before then, and they cost you $50 after then, nobody's been helped. It doesn't help the United States if France pays twice as much for drugs. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that. So Donald Trump manufactures out of whole cloth this ridiculous story of talking to French President Macron and demanding that he double his drug prices, which is not something that Macron could do if he wanted to, which of course he wouldn't want to. But Trump, he told this story, and he did a Macron impression. No, Donald, I cannot double my prices. It's like, you can't. The French president can't double. I mean, that doesn't work. I mean, this so clearly and honestly did not happen. I mean, it's not just and Macron denied that it happened, and Macron said, "I can't. We're not going to do anything to our drug prices," because Trump said, "Because I'm going to jack up your tariffs if you don't double your prices." I mean, it's just ludicrous, Looney Tunes disconnection.
You're not in a very good position. You're not in a good position. Yeah.
And I'm betting most people don't even know that Trump said that. I mean, that would have ended every presidency prior to Donald Trump's. It would have ended George W. Bush's presidency if he'd gone out in public and said, "I just talked to French President Macron and he's promised to double drug prices." I mean, everybody would say, "You're making that up. You're a lunatic. And no way on earth should you still be in the Oval Office." Anyway.
Let me steer you back to Glenn Beck if you're ready.
Beck,
yeah.
In 2010, Glenn Beck was at the height of his powers. He had a program on Fox News that was the most watched, I think the most watched cable news
show,
program of any subject.
Yeah.
And
on CNN, of all places, right?
Well, no, he was on CNN Headline News. I was a huge Glenn Beck fan, frankly. I thought Glenn Beck was really funny. He used to do this one bit called Moron Trivia, where he would find clerks at different 7-Elevens in different states and ask them basic questions about the news, and they would have no idea what was going on. He was just really funny, and his CNN Headline News show tried very hard to be nonpartisan. Something broke in Glenn Beck when Barack Obama was elected president. This is pre-Obama. And then when Obama was elected president, the world was going to end every 5. I mean, you talk about Jim Bennett being apocalyptic. Glenn Beck has predicted race wars and civil wars over and over and over again to the point of. But anyway, so in 2010, though, which is when my father was running for re-election and I was running his campaign, Glenn Beck was the most influential political commentator on the planet. And he was a member of the church, and we were absolutely terrified that he was going to come out against us, that he was going to do all of this. So my father served as a bishop in the Monument Park stake when the stake president was a man named John M. Huntsman. Not junior, but senior, John Huntsman Sr. John Huntsman Sr. interviewed me to go on my mission, and that was a very unpleasant experience.
I remember the story.
Yeah. But John Huntsman Sr. and my father were very close, and John Huntsman Sr. And Glenn Beck were very close. And Dad kept saying, "I need to sit down with Glenn Beck. I need to talk to Glenn Beck and let him know where I'm coming from, just hear what he has to say, all of this." And his best connection to Glenn Beck was John Huntsman. And so Dad said to John Huntsman, "Can you please get me a meeting with Glenn Beck? I would love to talk to Glenn Beck. I'm happy to fly out and talk to him in person. That's what I would prefer. If all he'll do is a phone conversation, then whatever I can get, I will take. But I want to talk to Glenn Beck. And John Huntsman said, I'll make it happen. And a couple of days went by, and he came back to us. And we had a meeting with John Huntsman. And John Huntsman said, all right, I've talked to Glenn. And Glenn has said, don't worry. You can tell Senator Bennett we don't need to meet. I am not going to get involved in the Utah race at all. And you have my word that I'm not going to get involved. So he can just not worry about it, and I'm not going to pay any attention to it. And okay, so that was that. So there was never a meeting between my father and Glenn Beck. Well, Glenn Beck, one of his apocalyptic visions involved a man named Cass Sunstein. Do you know who Cass Sunstein is?
I do not.
Well, if Glenn Beck had been right, Cass Sunstein would be the reason you are now living in a communist, totalitarian, Marxist nightmare.
Sounds like an evil guy.
Well, he was also, so he was appointed by Barack Obama, and I don't even remember what the office was. So I'm about to say that it was the Office of Management and Budget, but he was not even the head of it. It was sort of a lower level position. And in fact, it was a position in which that he had held in the Reagan administration. Economically, Cass Sunstein was really quite conservative. And when Obama appointed him, a lot of people sort of raised their eyebrows because he had worked for Republican administrations previously. And when he was appointed, my father voted to confirm him, as did Orrin Hatch, the other senator from Utah, as did, I think, a majority of Republican senators. But Glenn Beck knew better, because Glenn Beck somehow found some academic thing that Cass Sunstein had written in college that sounded Marxist to him. And Glenn Beck had this huge conspiracy about how Cass Sunstein was Barack Obama's way of, he's going to sneak him in this office, but then it's going to end the world. I mean, it was really, Cass Sunstein was the only person that Glenn Beck would talk about for weeks on end. So his promise to not get involved in the race went out the window, because Bob Bennett obviously is a communist, because he voted to confirm Cass Sunstein. So, I mean, we just kind of settled in for that, and I think that hurt us drastically. I don't know that we would have won if Glenn Beck had stayed out. I don't think we would have. But he had Mike Lee on and endorsed Mike Lee, and one of the things he said was, I would vote for a mouse before I would vote for Bob Bennett. And so, okay, great. So I pulled this up because I wrote this up. I want to give you the exact words that Glenn Beck said on this occasion. I can give you the
This
date.
is a direct quote, like an email, or where are you getting this?
I can give you the exact date when he said it. You can find it online. I am not making this up. This is verifiable.
Okay.
This was on the radio. It was not on television, so you can't see him, but you can hear him. I'm just going to read you what I wrote. I wrote this editorial. I tried to get the Washington Post to run it, and they didn't care. Anyway, Mr. Beck took to the airwaves on April 27th, 2010, and he said he would, quote, vote for a mouse over Bob Bennett, and we knew we had a serious problem on our hands. Oh, and then I tell you a bunch of other stuff. Okay. The same day, he expressed his preference for rodents over Bob Bennett. Glenn Beck castigated my father for voting to confirm Cass Sunstein as the Obama administration administrator of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, which I don't even know if that's a thing anymore.
Yeah.
and here's what Glenn Beck said. You have Bob Bennett. You have a guy who looked me in the eye. A guy who looked me in the eye and said, you know what? Cass Sunstein, he told me this was all academic stuff. I mean, I looked him in the eye, Glenn, and Cass Sunstein, that's all academic. And I listened to that and I went, Bob Bennett looked you in the eye? And not only that, the conversation, it's like he invents dialogue where Bob Bennett calls him by name. I mean, I looked him in the eye, Glenn, and Cass Sunstein, that's all academic. That didn't happen. I went straight to my father and I said, Dad, did you have a phone call? I mean, this is in 2010, and so Zoom calls weren't really a thing. So did you call him? Did you talk to him? And he says, I have never spoken to Glenn Beck. I've had no contact with Glenn Beck ever in my entire life. And I just was aghast that Glenn Beck made that up, just completely made it up. There isn't an ounce of truth in it at all. Bob Bennett never looked him in the eye. I have heard secondhand from somebody who actually, because I've talked about this now for years. It's now 2026, and I've talked about it. Anytime Glenn Beck's name comes up, I tell this story. and somebody who knows Glenn Beck, I mean, this is all kind of third hand, because this person didn't talk directly to Glenn Beck, but they talked to somebody who talked to Glenn Beck. And Glenn Beck said, I was thinking of Orrin Hatch. And to me, it's like, okay, well, you look, D. Hewitt says when Glenn Beck is wrong, he admits it, and I respect that. If you made a mistake and you thought this was Orrin Hatch, which in and of itself makes no sense, because you had Mike Lee on your radio program that same day. You knew exactly who Mike Lee was running against. You knew exactly who you were railing against. And the idea that you would confuse that with Orrin Hatch, that doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. And so I just knew that Glenn Beck will make stuff up if it's helpful, if it's dramatic. I mean, that's a very dramatic story of Glenn Beck's,
so
my father.
You're not surprised. Look, go ahead. You're not surprised that he's supporting Trump now? Is that kind of what I mean?
I don't see how Glenn Beck could survive if he didn't support Trump. Because there is.
So you don't think he honestly came to a realization that he was wrong? You just think, hey, I got to survive here financially.
I think that episode on April 27th of 2010 demonstrated just how malleable Glenn Beck's principles are. That if something is useful to him, he will say it, whether or not it's true, which demonstrates, I think, a really loose relationship with principle. So the idea that, okay, Glenn Beck says the world's going to end if Trump's elected. Okay, Trump's elected, and all of my people voted for him. Well, I have two choices. I can stand on principle, or I can abandon principle and get my people back. Which do you think the guy who is willing to make stories up is going to do? I mean, it doesn't surprise me in the least. What it demonstrates to me is that Glenn Beck is a man of expediency and not a man of principle. This is not a man that is willing to, do what is right, let the consequence follow. This is a man that follows the herd, whatever it is that's going to get him the kind of position of prominence that he's never been able to recapture since he lost it in 2010. I mean, Fox News cancels a show, and he has these. Glenn Beck has had so many meltdowns of just absolutely ludicrous proportions that I don't understand how anybody takes him seriously now. And the reality is that very few people do, comparatively speaking. I mean, Glenn Beck isn't anywhere near in the top echelon of, the Tucker Carlsons or the.
Tucker is taking a dive too. Let's get to some of
dive now too, but I mean, Glenn Beck is yesterday's news, really, to a large degree.
Here's another one. MBQ6141 says, I'm LDS and Trump still hasn't won me over. He doesn't match my morals or constitutional ideology. Someone else said, BBQ Bros 3648 said, Romney was the voice of out-of-touch old members, which is similar to what someone said in the super chat earlier, though.
Yeah.
They're trying to be respectful. another one here. Nick Wicketer Surfer said, voted for McMullen, lost. Voted for Trump, lost. Hopefully he wins this time. I've met Mitt Romney several times. He may be a moral man, but his policies would weaken our country and increase immorality. Great videos, subbed. I love that they subbed, so, okay.
Well,
any of your thoughts on any of those reactions to kind of this discussion about Trump and the Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, here is the elephant in the room, if you want to use that metaphor.
Yeah, I love it.
We're going to get to Clark Gilbert. But here's the elephant in the room. When I have talked to people and about one-on-one about why they voted for Trump, there are many who will concede, Mike Lee likes to say, well, he just has these mean tweets. It's like, well, yeah, and he also tried to overthrow the government and hang his vice president. There is that, which is a little more than mean tweets, but okay. It comes down to abortion. The Latter-day Saints fell in with Trump because they see it as essential that the president of the United States be opposed to abortion. And it's been really fascinating that once you step away from partisan, when I was, as I describe myself, a Republican hack, it's not enough that the other party is wrong. The other party has to be evil. That's what gets you up in the morning. It gets you up in the morning. You really, really want to see. One of the things that I loved when in 2004, I remember watching George W. Bush's election night returns for his reelection. And early exit polls had come out that said that John Kerry was going to win that election. And you could see George Stephanopoulos, and he's the one that just drove me crazy. But you could see smirking, like, I know something you don't. No, Bush is toast. Oh, ho, ho. And then the actual election returns came in, and Bush won handily. And you could see their faces fall. You could see how miserable they were. And I just loved
kind of like
that.
In 2016, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 2016, you watched everybody's faces fall and melt down, and Rachel Maddow.
They're all so happy at the beginning of the
right.
Yeah, they're like, it's going to be a great election day, everyone.
There's a real cruelty to it that we don't really like to acknowledge, that I don't like to admit, really, but I sort of reveled in that. It was so much fun to see the other side lose. It wasn't even so much watching your guy win. It's, look at you. You lost. Your evil, terrible guy lost. And so when you step away from that, you start to see just how tribal politics is, that it's more like the Super Bowl than it is about any kind of policy being enacted. And the way we know that is that the Republican Party now under Trump is doing everything the opposite of what a Republican Party under Romney, that guy hated, would have done, that the Republican Party under George W. Bush did. That the Republican
not
Party
entirely. They didn't abandon everything from the original Republican Party.
No, you know what they didn't abandon? Abortion. That's it.
Yeah, that's
it. And so let's talk about abortion for a second.
Which is what you were going to talk about. So here we go.
Which is what I'm going to talk about. No, because so having stepped away from sort of the tribalism, I start to look at abortion. And one of the things that has always bugged me about abortion is that, and I don't know that a lot of members of the church realize this, but if you go to General Conference in person, have you ever been to General Conference in person at the conference center?
Yes, many times.
What happens as you walk in? What's happening outside?
The protesters.
Center? Protesters. What are they protesting?
Yeah. Most of the there's a guy who's dressed up as the devil. I actually have a video on this, so if anyone wants to check it out, I made a video about this. But a lot of them are protesting. They're usually Christians. They're protesting about our different Jesus, that our teachings are inspired by the devil. There's a guy who famously dresses up as the devil. There's been interviews with these people who say, "Oh, I'm out here teaching them the true gospel because they have a false gospel." So most of it, they're all Christians who are preaching.
They're all Christians. That is true. Their main focus, in my estimation, roughly 80% of them. I mean, yeah, they talk about Joseph Smith as a false prophet, and they talk about this, that,
the
and the
Bible,
other.
but
the reason they know that is because the Mormons are pro-choice. Most of these
I've
guys
never seen anyone at General Conference protesting about abortion at General Conference.
Talk to them. I've gone and talked to them. There was one guy that had dirty tampons on his sign. I mean, it was just the wildest thing in the world.
They were fake dirty.
but many of these guys are anti-abortion protesters because they are so angry at the church's position, which they consider to be a pro-choice position. Now, in terms of the church's actual policy, if you were to take that policy and try to legislate it in, say, give me the Mississippi, okay, well, I don't know, give me the reddest state in the country. If you went in and said, okay, you're going to make abortion illegal, but you're going to say that victims of rape and incest can get an abortion, and you're going to say that if a mother's health, not just her life, but if her health is threatened, you're going to let them get an abortion. They would run you out of town on a rail because they would consider that a pro-choice bill. And the vast majority of the legislation that is passed in all of these states that bans abortion does not have a rape or an incest exception, does not have a health exception. They have life exceptions, which are really problematic because all that means is the woman has to be near death before she can get an abortion. I mean, it's just really sort of a scary kind of thing. But okay, fine, if that's you're saying, but it's so important that that we prevent abortion, that we just sort of live with that kind of a contradiction and live with the fact that the church's position really is considered by most of the world to be a pro-choice position. But regardless, here is the thing that has really sort of opened my eyes on abortion. And there is have you ever heard of the Mexico City policy?
I do not think so.
Maybe you know it by the name the Global Gag Rule. Does that mean anything to you? So when Ronald Reagan was elected, he put in what this was decided in Mexico City at some kind of big international hoo-ha. So it's called the Mexico City policy, but it doesn't have anything to do with Mexico City. It's they also call it the Global Gag Rule. And it is that if any non-government organization gets any federal support at all, they are not allowed not only to offer abortions, they're not even allowed to mention that abortion is an option. And it's a way of silencing all of these NGOs that go out into developing nations and provide women's health care. If they want federal money, they can't even mention that abortion exists. So that's instituted by Ronald Reagan. It is reinstituted by George H.W. Bush. It is reversed by Bill Clinton. It is reinstituted by George W. Bush. Every Republican since Reagan has reinstituted, including Trump. Every Democrat since Clinton has reversed it. Now, so we now have over 40 years of data as to what this policy does. What do you think the policy does? I mean, in terms of, so if I were to say to you, okay, this policy has had an impact on abortion rates. It's had a significant impact on abortion rates. What do you think that impact is?
I'm curious to hear what you're going to tell me.
It drives up abortion rates by 40%, which is a staggering number. And what you discover from that is that when you criminalize abortion, particularly in that kind of a circumstance, it's impossible to do that surgically, because when you pull the rug out from under these organizations are organizations that provide contraception, that provide education, that provide a lot of the things that make abortion unnecessary.
You're talking about Planned Parenthood?
Including well, I don't know. Planned Parenthood, I don't know if they're included as one of these NGOs, but they may very well likely be. Sure. But the point is that the global gag rule reduced resources that were preventing abortion. And so the number of unwanted pregnancies goes up, the number of abortions goes up. And it doesn't go up by a small amount, it goes up by 40%. And the other thing is, what do you think has happened to the national abortion rate since Roe versus Wade has been overturned? It has gone up by 11%, which is staggeringly high in the sense that the abortion rate since Roe versus Wade was enacted has plummeted under every presidency except for one, and that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump, even in his first term, the abortion rate ticked up. It was rather kind of insignificant. But since then, I mean, I guess maybe it went up under Joe Biden because this 11% was in place as a result of Roe versus Wade being overturned. Because when you criminalize abortion in Mississippi, you don't eliminate abortion, you drive abortion to another state. And when you criminalize abortion, you also make it more difficult for women to get access to contraception. You also eliminate the kinds of educational tools that prevent unwanted pregnancies. And the thing that was happening prior to
does it have to be that way? Why does it have to be that way where people lose contraception and education at the same time as when abortions are cut or like legally defunded?
Well, because I mean, does it have to be that way?
Sorry, we don't have to get into like a whole thing here, but let's. I
mean, you can theoretically create a circumstance where it's not that way, but the reality is that
in practice, the Republicans that are trying to be pro-life are actually failing.
For nearly half a century now, we have seen that that's what happens when you criminalize abortion, and we're seeing that in the wake of Roe versus Wade. And when I say that. The Republicans go, well, that's what we just need to make a national abortion ban. It's like, okay, great. You know, there have been countries that have tried that. Ireland has tried that, and they've reversed that. Because the way you eliminate abortion is not to make it illegal, it is to make it unnecessary. The thing that I have discovered in my sort of post-partisan life is that nobody likes abortion. Abortion is always
I don't know if nobody likes it, but keep going.
No, I mean, well, the thing is, you know, if you're getting an abortion, something bad has happened. You are in a pregnancy that you don't want, and, you know, which they don't want.
We do see celebrities celebrating abortion in ways that I think the culture... I mean, I think this is a cultural thing, but I don't want to get too sidetracked here.
But the thing is, those celebrities, if abortion were entirely unnecessary, if there were no unwanted pregnancies, if no women were at risk of losing their lives or their health, if nobody were raped and had to carry the child of their rapist to term, if all that went away, you wouldn't have a single celebrity going, well, why aren't we having any more abortions? We should have more abortions.
I think we would, because you have people doing it for career purposes. You have people doing it out of convenience. That's the talking point from the other side.
Well, sure. Well, but my point being, though, that it is now, we're in 2026, And the number of ways to prevent pregnancy have increased exponentially since 1972 when Roe versus Wade was enacted. And the way you prevent abortion is you make it unnecessary. And when you make it illegal, you feel good about yourself, but you don't prevent abortion. And this is the thing that's always. So I will ask people when they start going, well, I can't vote for Kamala Harris. She's for abortion. And I'm against abortion. And why do you want to kill all these babies? I go, okay, person, which is more important to you? Preventing abortion or making it illegal? Which is more important? Because they are not the same thing. We have voluminous data that shows they are not the same thing. And very often the second increases abortion rather than prevents it. And so I don't get, so when people tell me, oh, you progmo and you want all these babies killed, I mean, I loathe abortion. I would love to see abortion disappear. And you know what? If criminalizing abortion made that happen, I'd be 100% on board to make that happen. But the more I look at it and the more I see the data, it just doesn't work. And see, I'm kind of really weird on this because one of the great things that I think the Supreme Court has ever done is overturning Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade.
But you just said, no, I'm just kidding.
No, it's atrocious law.
I get what you're saying, though. Like, legally speaking, it was
legally speaking, the Supreme Court did not have the ability to say the Constitution guarantees you a right to an abortion within the first trimester of pregnancy. There's nothing. I mean, the way they decided that was, okay, you have this right to privacy that isn't explicitly listed in the abortion, but we cobble that right together from these two different amendments. And then we take those amendments and we look at the light that is shining out of those amendments. And in the penumbra of the light, I mean, here I can see the little fuzzy light around my finger as I wave it. That's the penumbra. In that penumbra of the right to privacy is where you find the right to abortion. I mean, that's just ludicrous. That's just, I mean, that's not the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's supposed to be the umpire that calls balls and strikes. That's the Supreme Court rewriting law, what a home run is.
Inventing law. So if people want to learn more about some of this data that you're citing on abortions, where can they find that? Some people are asking in the chat. And then we'll get into the next segment.
Well, let's see.
Here, while you're looking that up, we're going to get into the Big Ear Bulletin because we want to talk about, I think we're going to wrap this up with a reaction to the new member of the Quorum of the 12 who actually said something about politics that I think is relevant to some of our conversation.
I haven't heard what he said, so I'm interested to hear what he had to say.
All right, let's get to it.
Run.
All right, his name is Elder Clark G. Gilbert, called to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. First off, what were your thoughts when he was called as an apostle? Any thoughts? Just like a one-sentence reaction when you heard that he was going to be the new apostle?
He was not my first choice.
Okay, well, we don't have to. We're not voting on anything, so
no, we're not. Okay, I mean, I'm not ripping my hair out about it, and I did a whole podcast on this with Ian on.
On Inside Out podcast.
On Inside
Check it out,
Out,
everyone.
Where I told the story. Who was the state president in Los Angeles, and I lived with him when I went to USC, and he had this experience where, as the state president, President Benson came and spoke at Fullerton College, and this was kind of right before President Benson sort of lapsed into dementia. The last few years of his presidency, he didn't show up to conference, and he wasn't well enough to speak. But this was sort of at the beginning of that, and he gave a regional conference where he repeated the phrase, "May the Lord bless you and the devil miss you," about 10 times. He just kept repeating himself. And my Uncle Howard was just completely aghast. And he says, "This is just, I don't understand why this guy, this is the president of the church?" And I went, "Oh, Uncle Howard, it sounds like you don't like him." And he looked at me like I was from Mars. Like, well, no, I don't like him. I didn't covenant to like him. I covenanted to sustain him, right? I mean, my Uncle Howard would never speak out against President Benson publicly and never tear him down and rip him apart. I mean, so when I say he wasn't my first choice, I really see this, frankly, and this isn't any indictment of Clark Gilbert, but I thought this was an opportunity. You know, the church is growing faster in Africa than anywhere else in the world. I thought this was an opportunity to allow African saints to look at General Conference and see somebody who looks like them as an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so when it was Clark Gilbert, I was like, oh, well, that's too bad. You know?
Well, let's see what he has to say.
Sure.
About politics. This was Peggy Fletcher Stack. Is that? Aren't you related to?
She is my first cousin. I'm allowed to say that now. We didn't talk about that, but I went on Mormon land, which is
I didn't know I was
podcast.
supposed to say that. So
no,
I'm glad
it's out of the bag.
It's out of the bag. Oh, I didn't mean to spill the beans here, but this is an interview. So let's listen to some. So we're talking about politics. We're talking about Trump, Latter-day Saints, getting some of your opinions on it because, I mean, whether you like it or not, you are in the minority about some of the stuff you're saying. So, but let's listen to.
That's true.
Elder Clark Gilbert here.
Patriot Party, which might be like some modern.
So he's talking about the screw tape letters
today, or towards
C.S.
the Peace
Lewis
Party, and I don't know all the ramifications of 1950s English politics, but you can see a pretty close parallel to the world we live in. And Screw Tape says to the junior devil, "Did you not hear anything I've taught you? Just make their political identity their first identity, and their faith subject to that, and we've won our man." And I think in this time where so many agendas would take over on all sides of political perspectives, we have to be anchored in the gospel of Jesus Christ and not any one partisan or political view, but really anchored in Jesus Christ and in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
All right.
No notes. He's exactly right.
No notes. Yeah. And I think I've heard you say this before that, you got to be a Latter-day Saint, a disciple of Christ, all those labels before you are Republican, Democrat.
That's correct.
Whatever you may be.
One of the things, one of my big lamentations is that it is astonishing how many people are Republicans first and Latter-day Saints second. You saw that in COVID. You saw that when the church.
It's not just Republicans, though, right? There's Democrats first, and then Latter-day Saints second.
There are, but
let's be fair here. We're going to talk about all sides.
But as you pointed out, Democrats in the church are, and again, people are going to look at me and think that I'm some kind of big Democrat. I am not. The only time I was a Democrat was when I tried to make my dad angry at 18 years old.
You're just a rhino, Jim.
Yeah,
I think you're a
not even a rhino because I can't.
A closeted MAGA man. That's what you are. Go ahead, Jim. Tell the people how much you love your president. Go ahead, Jim. He won't do it. Like a Doug. That's what you are, Jim. A Doug.
Anyway, I just got to tease you, man.
Not going to happen. That's fine. But
like
Democrats in this church already on a daily basis are told they're not welcome.
So it's about time we start telling the Republicans they're not welcome, right? I'm just kidding.
well, no, but what I'm saying is there's something about that kind of majority groupthink that somebody who is a Democrat in this church, even quietly, is already ostracized by a large chunk.
Well, maybe in Utah, but isn't that more of a cultural thing?
It's entirely a cultural thing, and Elder Gilbert is 100% right to call it out. But so when you say though that there are Democrats that make their politics, put their politics first before their
and Republicans, before the church membership.
What I would say is the cultural weight of opposition to Democrats within the church, I think, would make it very difficult for somebody who is that stridently Democrat to survive in the church. My guess is that they've probably already left. But the number of Democrats that sit in the pews and just sort of dread somebody quoting Ezra Taft Benson in sacrament meeting. There are a lot of those. But I think most of those guys suffer in silence and know. And I know there are a lot of those because they reach out to me quietly, right? Because I'm a loudmouth. And they think I'm one of them when I don't necessarily think I'm one of them. I don't have any. I think Chuck Schumer is an absolute goober. I think, and here's how I'm going to point to this, why it's not partisan. A lot of people will say, well, if you lose Trump, if Trump, somehow you get him out of office, then J.D. Vance becomes president. And he'll be so much worse. And I'll say, no, he won't. No.
So you think it's going to be better after Trump? You think things are going to normalize? Are you going to vote Republican again in the future?
Well, it depends on who runs.
Okay, DeSantis, J.D. Vance, do you like any of those? Rubio?
I was going to vote for Rubio in 2016.
I think he might run again. I think he'd do
I think all of these guys have sold their souls. It'll be very interesting to see what happens when Trump can't, when they're not scared of Donald Trump. You know, it was Lindsey Graham in 2016 said, if we nominate Donald Trump, we'll be destroyed and we'll deserve it. And it was Ted Cruz who said that Donald Trump is a megalomaniac, and Ted Cruz refused to endorse Donald Trump when he spoke in the 2016 convention. Donald Trump said, and finally, when he finally did endorse him, there was an independent group that put up billboards that showed Ted Cruz saying, "This November, vote for the man who said my father killed JFK and my wife is ugly." Because Donald Trump said
that's what he said. Yeah, I remember. Those debates were wild.
But when they say, "Oh, but it'll be J.D. Vance, it'll be so much worse," and I say, "No, it won't. J.D. Vance will just be a bad president." Again, this is like with Joe Biden. We can survive a bad president. We can't survive a lunatic president. We can't survive a president.
But aren't we surviving because
for morality and reality, which is what Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is so far beyond the bounds of what has been acceptable political discourse for nearly 250 years that it is astonishing that we have normalized this, that we look at this and go, that's okay. As long as the president didn't stick his penis in E. Jean Carroll, it's okay that he sexually assaulted her. That's okay. He tells it like it is. No, you can't do that. JFK was kind of an awful person. He had the propriety to be ashamed of it. We didn't learn that JFK was sleeping with movie stars and mafia Don's girlfriends.
So it's better if we don't know?
No, it's not better if we don't know. It's better if we recognize that standard still matters.
Okay, yeah.
Right? If we had found that out while JFK was alive, JFK would likely have been kicked out of office. Bill Clinton was nearly kicked out of office. And what he did with Monica Lewinsky versus what Donald Trump is convicted in 34. It's the other thing we haven't talked about. He's a felon, for heaven's sakes. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, all of which have to do with him abetting a porn star while his wife was pregnant. Well, his third wife was pregnant because he's cheated on all of his wives. Really? What if Bill Clinton had done that? There's no way he would have survived that politically. There's no possible
impeached.
Way.
But Trump was impeached.
That's not even near the top of the list of the atrocities that Donald Trump is involved in. It's just, this is the thing, is that I will settle for a horrible president as long as it's a normal president. J.D. Vance, who knows what J.D. Vance actually believes? Because the Republican Party has become so malleable. J.D. Vance once called Trump America's Hitler, and we have now, all of the Republicans are now. What they'll say privately versus what they'll say publicly is vastly different. Mitch McConnell, for instance, despises Donald Trump, always has. Mitch McConnell spoke after me at my father's funeral.
Oh,
my
really?
father was very close to Mitch McConnell, and one of the reasons I wasn't terrified when Trump became president in 2016 is, well, Mitch McConnell's the head of the Senate. He'll keep him in line. And Mitch McConnell rolled over just like everybody else did. So,
well, Jim, you're a passionate man and very passionate about Trump.
Oh, you know it, baby.
Trying to keep it light here and tell some jokes, speak in Trump voice.
You said you're going to talk about
you're
Trump.
You're very passionate.
Like, well, I mean,
I'm glad we got to talk about this because, I mean, it is the elephant in the room, I think, in a lot of ways, because you have, a lot of members who like Trump, who support Trump, who voted for Trump. You should check out that video I made. I think it's quite interesting because a lot of members voted for Trump but don't necessarily approve of him and everything that he's doing. So you kind of see like a big discrepancy between the percent that voted and those that approve. And I hope...
and part of the way I've reconciled this, Ryland, I know we're trying to wind up and I've rambled way more than anybody should. But part of the way I reconcile this is that I grew up in a family that ate, slept, breathed politics 24 hours a day. My grandfather was a 4-term senator. My father's a 3-term senator. Very first politician in my family was the first mayor of Salt Lake City. No, I guess he was the 3rd mayor of Salt Lake City, but his nephew was the first governor of Utah, a man by the name of Daniel H. Wells, who was also in the first presidency with Brigham Young. And when I ran for office, I would always tell this story. Daniel H. Wells, prior to joining the church, was a practicing attorney in Illinois, the same time as Abraham Lincoln. And the apocryphal story is that Daniel H. Wells met Abraham Lincoln and said to him on their first meeting, "You, sir, are a dead man, for I swore to myself, if I ever met a man who was uglier than I was, I would shoot him on sight." To which Abraham Lincoln replied, without batting an eye, "Shoot away. If I'm uglier than you, I don't want to live." and I tell that story because I look very much like Daniel H. Wells.
Yeah, I've read that in your book.
But the thing is, I can give grace, I think, to Trump supporters in the church in that I eat, sleep, and breathe this. I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, and I don't expect others to do the same. And if you are a Latter-day Saint who is concerned, and rightly so, about abortion, and you don't pour over data about the Mexico City policy, and you don't think about it beyond the fact that I don't like abortion and I want abortion to stop, you're just going to sort of reflexively vote for whoever is against abortion. And I really genuinely think that is the overwhelming justification for Donald Trump among Latter-day Saints, because Latter-day Saints are very principled on this issue, as again, well, they should be. And I really do think the case can be made that they've been sold a pig in a poke on this, but they don't care. They're going about their lives. They're not fretting over whatever. They don't have any kind of derangement syndrome. They don't care about politics that much. So I when I say you can't be decent and support Donald Trump, I think that's a different thing from saying you can't be decent and have voted for Donald Trump, in that I don't think that the vast majority of people who voted for Donald Trump were thinking it through. Doesn't mean they're dumb. It means this wasn't a priority for them. But so I do think that if you know all this stuff and Donald Trump is still your guy, I do think there's something fundamentally damaged about your moral compass. And
okay. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there. Did you?
No, that's it.
Okay, yeah. So to finish off here, last thing, Jim, Do you have a message for those Latter-day Saints who voted for and or support Donald Trump? Anything that you can say to help build the bridge?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I don't. I
mean, you kind of already did, so I guess I should.
Well, we're now in 2026, right? Donald Trump has been poisoning our civic discourse for a decade now. Over
10 years, over a decade since he came down those elevators in Las Vegas.
There are voters now. I read a piece by David French, who's a wonderfully principled evangelical conservative never-Trumper, who talked about the percentage of Gen Z that don't know a political landscape independent of Donald Trump. That Donald Trump,
that's wild. That's wild
is the only thing they know. They don't remember what us Generation Xers, not boomers, would call normal. They don't remember what normal politics was. Politics to them has always been one person living in a separate reality from the other. It's always been acceptable to them that an insurrectionist who tried to overthrow a free and fair election is able to become president of the United States after doing that. That's just the world they live in, and they don't know anything different. That, I think, is the heartbreaking thing about it. But so building bridges requires, again, that common understanding of what reality is. And we've lost that. I'm hoping we can regain that, because I think that the people that Trump has scared into submission, once he's gone and is no longer a threat, I'm hoping that Lindsey Graham might start making sense again. I don't know how long I think Mitch McConnell's not long for this world. I think he's quite ill.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping Marco Rubio makes sense again. Marco Rubio made a tremendous amount of sense prior to losing to Donald Trump and then deciding he had to become Donald Trump.
But 2028 is going to be fascinating for sure. I don't know who the Democrats are going to put up, and I don't know who the Republicans are going to put up for election.
I am terrible. When Donald Trump says he's going to run in 2028,
do you think
it's not a joke? I mean, I think
he can't.
Probably
it's illegal.
Be dead. No, he can't legally, but what? Steve Bannon says he's going to run.
3 branches of federal government for a reason. They're not like the Supreme Court would not let that happen, for example.
They wouldn't?
I would hope.
They gave him total immunity and said he can never be prosecuted for any crimes.
I don't know enough about that to get into that. But
for heaven's sake,
I just think that there's no way that's going to happen 2028. Look, to your point,
Donald
he's too
Trump
old anyway.
He's
not gonna live that long.
No, that I think is what will save us. I think Donald Trump's addiction to cheeseburgers is what's going to ultimately save democracy.
I love McDonald's. They have the McDonald McTrump, golden fries, double crisp to match my skin tone. How about that?
There you go.
I pull up to the window. I'm like, Joe, where's my order, Joe? Sleepy Joe. Let's be honest. He's probably sleeping right now.
Well, I don't know if this is of any value to anybody, but my father and Joe Biden were very good friends. Dad considered Joe Biden his best friend on the other side of the aisle. And the reason why they were such good friends had nothing to do with politics. Joe Biden's nickname for my father was Bishop. He thought it was so funny that my father had been a bishop, because Joe Biden is a devout, believing Catholic to this day. And they would trade religious books. I remember talking to my father, and he was reading a book called Papal Sins. I'm like, Papal Sins? What's that? He goes, oh, Biden gave it to me. And he says, but I gave him Hugh Nibley's book. And he's like, they were in this really lovely, good-natured attempt to convert each other. I mean, they both knew that it wouldn't happen, but they both were men of deep and profound faith. And Donald Trump, I mean, the Christians, Donald Trump doesn't, he gave a talk about 2 Corinthians. He's
Second
never cracked.
Corinthians.
No, it wasn't Second Corinthians. As we read in 2 Corinthians.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is a man who has never cracked open a Bible.
Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. Yeah.
This is a guy who says he's never asked for forgiveness. This is a guy.
That was wild.
I don't think I need to. I don't think the guy upstairs cares for my forgiveness. I don't think I need to.
It's like I was eating lunch with Speaker Mike Johnson, and he wanted to say grace, and I'm like, Mike, we're eating. It's like, well, yeah, you know what?
Don't do that, Mike. We don't say grace.
Say a prayer before they eat.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever met a Christian, Donald? Have you ever been? I mean, it's just so.
He pretends to be Christian, but he's definitely.
There is no.
It's hilarious.
This is not a guy
not.
that has any connection to the divine whatsoever. And so again, that's another thing with like Latter-day Saints. It's like this is the guy whose people around him hate Mormons. Hate them. Democrats don't hate Mormons. Democrats don't pay any attention to any kind of. I mean, it's just like religious people. Who cares?
Well, they hated Mormons when Romney was running.
Oh well, they
sure
hated
did.
Romney. They didn't hate Harry Reid when he was the most Harry Reid, the most powerful elected official in the history of the United States of America, the most powerful Mormon elected official in the history of the United States of America was a Democrat. It was Harry Reid as the Senate Majority Leader. And his religion was absolutely no problem for his party. Whereas it's just stunning to me how many people don't realize that you saw this after Michigan, right? You saw this after the shooting in Michigan, when there was this huge outpouring of grief, followed by, well, of course, though, you're not Christians, right? I mean, you had all these evangelical pastors saying, well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Our prayers are with the Latter-day Saints. It's too bad they're not Christians. And
Trump said it was an attack on Christians. So,
yeah,
ironically,
Trump is also
the guy
stupid.
At the top. Well, he wasn't wrong about that. I mean,
no, he wasn't. A broken clock is right twice a day.
He was right that time.
Trump's stupidity has allowed a number of good things to happen when people manipulate him to do good things. But that happens less and less as he surrounds himself with equally stupid people. But anyway, these are people that are more than happy to take our money as Latter-day Saints and more than happy to take our votes. But they don't think we're Christians, and they don't think we have a seat at the table, and they hate us more than they hate Democrats. And it's astonishing to me again that so many Latter-day Saints don't see that at all. They think we're their friends. They think they're our friends. They think we're buddies. And they will throw us under the bus the minute we are no longer politically necessary. And they will do so with relish and delight. That's a populistic way to end this, isn't it?
There's a way to end. So, Jim, people can find you on the Inside Out podcast on X.
Inside
you get a little wild on X, man.
And Ian Wilkes, yes.
You get a little wild on X, but if people can follow you.
I do.
So, if you're on that platform, it's what is it? Stallion Cornell?
Stallion Cornell, yes. That's my pen name. There's a long story behind it. And people ask if it's my porn name. It's not. But,
pen.
I don't have a porn name yet.
Okay, I'm worried that YouTube's just going to censor the crap out of this one, but we'll have to see.
YouTube has censored, not YouTube. Twitter has censored. So one of the things that I'm doing that has nothing to do with politics, I'm in the Tabernacle Choir.
Yeah.
I make music. I love, and AI, I just adore AI. And I have a subscription to Suno, which is an AI sort of music thing that allows me to make professional sounding versions of all of my goofy songs. And so I'm also making AI videos to go along with them. And one of my songs, the one that's on my Twitter profile now, is the Ammon song. And it's the story of Ammon, And
I watched that
the
one.
story of
Yeah.
Ammon involves lots and lots of severed arms, and I lean into
blood.
that in the video. And X tagged it as graphic content. So I guess
Yeah.
I am a bit of a smut monger, if you will.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, this is Ether's Elephant. That is Jim Bennett. We're trying to build bridges here. So thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.